All right. Hi, guys, and welcome back to today's episode of the Barbell Lifestyle Podcast. I am your host, Christina Lynn, and I am here with my other co host, Marissa Roy. And today we're going to talk all about what to do if your significant other or friends or family members don't support you in your fitness journey or trying to get healthy. And then we're also going to dive into the same kind of aspect, but with competing and competitive bodybuilding.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one because I think this is one of the most important things that a lot of people don't really talk about. Like, we have clients that sign on with us all the time, and they're super excited and enthusiastic about reaching their goals. But when it comes to actually making changes to your habits and to your behavior, a lot of times your environment can be a really important piece in that. And if someone around you doesn't support you, or if there are comments coming from your household, this is something we see a lot, and it's hard to have those conversations. And so hopefully today we can help you guys navigate these conversations better, and kind of approach it from some insight from our experience in the past.
Yeah, exactly. So our goal for this episode is to maybe help you feel more comfortable having those conversations, maybe to give you some tactics or some approaches that you can use with whoever it is that you feel like is not 100% on board with what you're doing. So like we mentioned, this could be a really hard topic to handle because these are people who are really close to you. So whether it's your friends and family, especially your family, like you're stuck with them for life. So it's really difficult to talk with people who you see all the time. You see it, Thanksgiving and Christmas and holidays, and you get comments and maybe you start to resent going to these events because you anticipate the comments, and it's hard sticking to your goals when you go over with them. So, so whether your significant other is a spouse, a friend, or a family member, we'll kind of touch on all of those different categories of people.
Yeah, I think too, because we don't choose our family. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we choose our friends to an extent, but we don't always choose our family. We don't always choose the people that we work with. So we can't just sit here and say like, oh, are they being negative to you? Get them out of your life. Like, we can't do that. Like, that's not practical for those
Mm-mm.
people. And I think that's a lot of the advice that kind of circulates around, graphics and memes in the fitness industry, where you see something on Instagram that says like, oh, if someone doesn't support your goals, then they're not worth like your time, or your real friends will show themselves
Mm-hmm.
when you are putting in all your effort to be your best self. And while that might be true, the same thing is going to happen with family, or the people that, or your husband or wife, and people that you can't get rid of and you shouldn't get rid of. And so we have to know how to productively approach these conversations in ways that don't just create that resentment, like Christina said.
Right. So I think what you should first do is try to figure out where the lack of support is coming from. So try to figure out what it is maybe that they don't like, or they're not supporting. So maybe they just have a lack of knowledge or education surrounding health and fitness, or competing, or just exercise in general. So this is something that I experienced with my parents when I first started competing. And I've always been into health and fitness and sports and being healthy. So that wasn't anything that was new to them, but it was the competing aspect. And so I still to this day, so I started competing in 2015, still to this day, my dad still doesn't really understand. He tries his best, and bless his heart. And I really appreciate that for him, or of him, but he just doesn't understand. And I can try to talk to him as much as possible. But I also just kind of know it's okay if he doesn't get it. He tries, but it's an education aspect for him. And his thing is, he sees me getting really tiny, and so he equates competing to being not healthy, and he just wants to make sure that I'm eating and I'm not starving myself. And so for his perspective, he sees me in a way that he thinks is not healthy. So that's really hard for him to watch and be supportive of, but he knows that it makes me happy at the end of the day. So if it's maybe a lack of knowledge or education surrounding what you're doing, maybe having more in-depth sit-down conversations with your friends or your family members and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing because I want to be healthier, or I want to do this because I really enjoy competing, and here's more about the sport.
Yeah, I think also, we have to zoom out and think about, what this industry looks like, how much misinformation there really is. And so every single person that you come across is going to have a drastically different viewpoint of what a fit and healthy lifestyle is. And that's because the marketplace and this industry is so oversaturated with different messages. And ultimately, this industry is just a lot of really passionate people about helping others, but not everyone is great at delivering it. And so in the fitness industry, we're just shouting opinions left and right at each other and trying to, get as many clients as we can, or, and I'm kind of speaking for the whole industry, not just Christina and I, but, some of these opinions or some of these methods aren't always the most evidence-based, and some of these methods aren't always the healthiest. Like, for example, the 500 calorie diets, or the 3-day fasts, or the crazy things that a lot of people fall susceptible to, because again, this industry is just shouting left and right, this is the way to do it. No, this is the way to do it. And so everyone has their own perception of what healthy or living a fitter lifestyle is, and not all of those perceptions are good. And then the other thing that I really wanted to touch on that you made me think of is, we really do want to help educate those people in our lives that are maybe not as knowledgeable, or maybe they just haven't, spent the time that you have listening to content like this. Like, the reason why you're here is because you're really invested in this, but not everyone in your life is. And ultimately, other people who aren't maybe quite so invested in their health and fitness journey, they first of all maybe aren't interested in learning quite that much. So having that sit down conversation can't be, hey, I'm just going to sit down and talk at you for an hour about what I'm doing, because they're going to either take that as a personal attack, you talking down to them about how what you're doing is great and awesome and how they should be supportive, or, it's just not going to be very well received from an attention span standpoint. And so when you are having those sit down conversations, a lot of times I encourage clients to answer when they are asked, but not to speak directly at or try to justify or explain everything they're doing at every moment. Because unless someone is genuinely curious in your field, it's kind of hard to get that message across, and it's hard to help educate those people in your life if they really don't care to know or want to know. So I would say one of the first pieces of advice that I'll give today is to answer when you're asked about what you're doing and why it's either evidence-based or healthier for you, and kind of approaching that with, I guess, less tenacity and more as a response.
Yeah, you make a really good point about people need to be receptive to the information that you're giving them. And if you feel, or if they feel like they're just being lectured to, they may not be as open to that information. So I think it's really good, like you mentioned, to just kind of explain if questions are being asked. But something that you made me think of was that meme where it's like, can't you, if you're trying to eat healthy, like, here, can't you just have this apple? And you're like, like, apple's like 30 grams of carbs. Like, and it's, and that, I feel like that's my dad, he's trying, but he maybe doesn't understand. But I think it's because there are just so many misconceptions out about what is healthy, what isn't. And you're like, well, I'm tracking macros, so it's not just health, it's this, it just made me think of that because it's so my dad.
Yeah, and that's so important too, because the way that you are approaching your health and fitness journey, you, the listener, is not the only way, right? And so let's say you are tracking macros, and for you, your portion sizes and measuring and weighing things is important to you during a specific time frame. that might not be the case for someone else in your family who is maybe also pursuing a healthier lifestyle, but maybe they're doing it in a more intuitive fashion, or maybe they're just trying to eat a primarily whole foods based diet, which is a great way to go about it. Or maybe they're using, portion sizes based on the size of their hand or something like that. And so remember that your way is not the only way. And so, don't be pushing your method on everyone else just because your coach said it's the best way. There are other valid ways to go about healthy living as well.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, from my experience, people's families and loved ones don't always really get the right information. So, they might have their parents who are on Weight Watchers or Whole30 or trying to do keto, or their siblings doing those sorts of things. And, they see it and they see how it's problematic. But remember that those people don't necessarily see how it's problematic. They also feel that they are pursuing a better life for themselves as well.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are approaching those conversations, maybe as one person on their endeavor for a healthier lifestyle to another, again, we're not talking down to those people or, degrading them for the method that they've chosen, but maybe, approach those conversations by asking questions. Why did you choose this method? How do you feel on this method? Where did you learn about it? Who did you learn about it from? And maybe, start using questions that might motivate them to explore the reasons why themselves.
Mm-hmm. So I think another thing to think about is where the lack of support is coming from. Is maybe you have a significant other or some friends who are jealous or insecure. And I have seen this a lot, especially when it comes to bodybuilding and competing, or just if one spouse wants to start getting healthy. So sometimes it can be like, well, who are you trying to impress? Why are you spending so much time at the gym? Don't you want to come hang out with me? And when I have seen from my experience, when you have one person who is trying to better themselves and spend more time in the gym and change their eating habits, it is getting out of their routine and what they're comfortable in. And maybe that your significant other, or your spouse, or your friends are not ready for that change, or they don't want to make that change. So they're threatened by that. Or maybe they see it as, well, you're not spending as much time with me anymore. You're spending all the time with the gym. Do you not care about me? Or, who are you trying to impress? So, and I have seen it sometimes where if someone starts making a positive change, they might be more afraid that you're going to upgrade, or you're going to leave them from someone else. And they're afraid of the changes that you're making with your body.
Yeah, I think a lot of that too speaks more to the dynamic of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, yes, those thoughts can arise and come about, but ultimately, I really think that comes down to the state of the relationship. Is it an insecure relationship where you are both, either both or one of you are worried about one leaving the other? Is this a typical tendency that tends to happen? Spoiler alert, that shouldn't be a part of a healthier relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Is paranoia and insecurity in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is difficult because maybe we're talking about a bigger issue, and we're not relationship therapists or anything like that. Well, Christina's a counselor, so
I am.
But I do think it speaks more to the dynamic of the relationship and the security that you have in that already. Because I remember one of the first conversations that my current boyfriend and I had about, I guess, jealousy and insecurity when we first started dating. So we had been dating for maybe 6 months or so, and spring and summer was approaching the next year, and we were gearing up for a beach volleyball season, and it would have been my first. And the conversation was just, and we both are not really jealous people, and we are very committed in our relationship. And we're at that point too, but the conversation was kind of just funny because he was like, wow, I'm really happy you're not the jealous type. And I was like, why do you say that? And he's like, because we're going to be spending all summer with a bunch of really fit men and women in basically half naked in bikinis and bathing suits playing beach volleyball. And I was like, huh, that's a good point.
Never thought of it like that.
Yeah. And so it really does, I guess that spoke to where our relationship was and still is. But it comes down to personalities, your dynamic, how secure you make each other feel in the other things that you do throughout the day. And then the other thing that I think is really important in that, from my own experience with Aaron, is we were on an endeavor for our fitness journey together. So at this point, I had, gotten out of my 2018 season. I had met him, and I was kind of in the beginning of a pretty long off season. And I actually sparked his curiosity in tracking macros. It's funny because he actually mentioned months after we had started dating, once he had expressed interest in starting to, track his diet, and he was curious about it. He was like, well, at first I thought it was really freaking weird that you did that. That you weighed all your food and you plugged it in all the time. Like, I'd never seen that before. I thought it was really strange. But as he just kind of like observed me do that over time, he got really curious about how he could do that to change his own body. I think that speaks to a couple of things, lead by example, not by pressuring others to do what you do. But also, we were on that journey together for the rest of that year, going into that summer season. So maybe he had felt, and I'm not going to speak for him, but maybe he had felt more secure because I was kind of in it with him on his journey, and he was in on mine. We would, track macros together. I would help him with logging some things if it was his first time searching up a new food item. And so kind of being inclusive, I guess, is the point I'm coming to here with your journey, especially in relationships and, with a marital partner or with a boyfriend or girlfriend or fiance, being inclusive, but again, not in a way that you are pressuring them to do it with you because you feel like they need to, but, do what you're going to do. But also, if they ask questions, show them what you're doing, how you're doing it, ask them if you would like them to, or if they would like to join in any way, shape, or form, but do so in a way that isn't pressuring.
Yeah, I love what you said there, and it also, I feel like I have a very similar story with my husband. Like, he was kind of the one who got me into working out on a more consistent basis. I'd always done it for softball and all throughout high school and in a little bit in college, but we started lifting together. So it was like our time after work where we get to spend together, and it was something that we got to do as a couple. But I kind of relate working out or going to the gym as like a hobby. That a lot of people have hobbies. Maybe they go bowling or painting or I don't know, whatever it is. And they go off and do that on their own. Maybe they do it with their significant other. But I feel like they shouldn't feel jealous of you going off and spending time to do something that you enjoy doing. That I don't feel like the gym is any different than any other hobby. But what I was going to say is I started getting into If It Fits Your Macros because I feel like back in 2014, the idea in the health and fitness industry was clean eating. And so we slowly started to transition into If It Fits Your Macros. And so I started tracking. And I remember we were on the way home from the gym and I was trying to explain how to do it. And my husband tried, I think, for one day. And he was like, that was too much work. Like, I'm not doing that again. And I was like, okay. So I did my first competition prep in 2015, and we moved to Texas from Virginia in 2017. And I remember he had seen me working with my coach at the time, and he had some fitness goals. He goes, I think I'm going to start tracking macros. Like, can you help me with this? And I was like, yeah, sure. But it was years later. And he still tracks macros now, but I think it's so funny because we literally went years having different kind of eating stylists, similar, but just different. But it was years until he did that too. And it does make it easier. But like you said, really not trying to force your lifestyle on your significant other or your friends or your family. It just, if they are open to it, then that's when they're going to make the change, not if you're trying to force it down their throats.
Yeah, and oftentimes times, if you guys saw that, actually, I got up and turned on a light because the sun's starting to set over here. But oftentimes, you know, when we are just living as an example or leading as an example, and we're with our significant other all the time, or maybe we have roommates, a lot of time that stuff just catches on better when you aren't forcing it on people.
Right. Or talking about it all the time, or you're obsessed with it, because people might start to resent you or resent your lifestyle.
Yeah. And I think it almost sets up this like mystique. If you're not like, you know, never talk about it ever, but like if you kind of, you know, just do your thing, you're not making it super known that like, oh, like I can't have X, Y, and Z because I don't have any carbs left, or like, oh, I'm out of fat for the day, and like kind of flaunting that around. Instead of doing something like that, you know, just kind of going about your day and doing what you need to do, kind of sparks more curiosity in people, especially when you start to see results, because, you know,
They speak for themselves.
Yeah, and kind of like the more you talk about it to others, you know, and this speaks to a greater issue, but you know, there's always that person that's either in competition prep or they are starting their healthier lifestyle, but all they do when they're doing that is they're complaining about it, and they're saying, oh, I can't have this, or I'm so hungry, or I'm, you know, so hangry or moody, or, you know, I'm craving X, Y, and Z. And those people who talk about all that all the time, you know, you don't want to be that person. You know, you don't want to be the person that is turning everyone else around you off to what you're doing without even, you know, trying, right? And so making it look like it's this undesirable thing to do, because ultimately you're choosing to do it and you're putting it on yourself. And that's kind of the bigger problem there is, you know, having that perspective that this is a blessing and a choice to be able to manipulate your own nutrition, but also know that the more you complain about it or whine about it, the more it's going to turn the people around you off to even trying, even if you want them to.
Yeah. And this is something that we touched on in episode 4 when it comes to competing. So if you are interested in that, or if you haven't listened to that, I'd go back to episode 4. And this is something that we'll definitely cover later on in the episode of kind of like what to do and things to do. And especially when it comes to competition prep. But yeah, so I think kind of getting back, it's, you know, is it a jealousy issue? Is it a lack of education? Or does your family or significant other maybe see competing or bodybuilding or going to the gym as a lack of respect or decency? So I have seen actually some of my friends where they've had boyfriends who are very controlling and wouldn't let them wear certain things to the gym, or they don't like the idea of stage shots or being online. They just don't like the idea of you being up on stage in a bikini, or if you're a male, you know, in your posing trunks. And this is actually something that I dealt with my husband when I first told him I wanted to compete. He didn't like the idea of it. And he said, I don't understand why you need to go on stage in a bikini and show off. And I was like, well, actually, the idea of getting on stage is terrifying. If I could remove that, if I could have less people in the audience, like that would be a lot better for me. It's really hard, but I had to tell him it's not the end result. It's not the stage photos. It's the whole journey getting there. It's the experience of everything. And like once you've gone through a prep, you will understand it a little bit more. But it was really hard trying to breach that subject because he saw competing as disrespectful. And that was also, again, when I mentioned that, you know, I'm a school counselor, and it was really hard for me to get past the idea of having potential stage photos online and having kids, parents, administration seeing those. And even though I equate it to your competition bikini as like your sport uniform, a lot of people don't see it that way. And I think that we are lucky now in 2021 that it is more common than it was back in 2014, 15. So it's not as taboo as it used to be. But that doesn't mean that your significant other, friends or family or coworkers may see it as disrespectful or that you're not a decent person.
definitely had a little bit of that with my mom. I love her to death. But every now and again, if I would post like a progress picture, a lot of people who are not into bodybuilding specifically, even people who are into fitness and not into bodybuilding, you know, we see our bodies as a canvas in this sport. And, you know, it really is an art form as much as it is an athletic endeavor. And so it is hard to find that balance between, you know, are you going to post your progress picture and post your body, you know, close to naked, because you're proud of that hard work and because it is a showcase of your physique as again, an art form. But that's difficult because, you know, you're either in a bathing suit or your underwear or something like that. And it is in a lot of cultures, which segues me perfectly into something that I think really needs to be touched on, can be seen as very taboo. So this is something, the next thing I was going to say was, you know, cultural differences. And this kind of goes into a lack of respect, not only with that aspect of things, the physique and the gym, but with diet. Being half Korean myself, I unintentionally, but thankfully, because I'm so glad my eyes have been open to this, have attracted a higher population, I would say, of Asian clients over the years. I would say I get a lot of people who just kind of relate because they're like, oh, like I see you're half Asian, and you know, it's really nice to see, you know, another Asian in this industry that I feel like I can trust and relate to, and we kind of attract, you know, like attracts like, right? And what I've noticed working with a lot of Asian females, especially ones who maybe still live at home with their parents, who are maybe in college or like young adults who haven't moved out quite yet. I see this in Asian families a lot with the, you know, the cultural expectations and the cultural judgment, especially in Asian cultures, but I know it can extend to other cultures as well across the world, of, you know, you're a female, you need to be very skinny, or even males, in a lot of Asian cultures, they want them to be skinny and thin. In addition, you know, they will also, you know, Asian cultures are very centric around food. And so parents love to cook, and that's not just Asians, but this is, you know, one specific example. They love to cook for their kids. They love to, you know, make all of their favorite dishes, and, you know, you cannot say no in those situations because you know, your parents put all of their love into the food that they made you. But one of the ironic things that I see with, I don't know if this part specifically extends to other cultures, but with a lot of Asian cultures, Korean, Chinese, Vietnamese, Japanese, that I've seen and worked with, you know, the parents will cook, they'll insist you eat all of it. And if you don't eat all of it, then you're disrespectful. But then once you finish it, you're fat. You're fat for finishing it. And it's literally like this completely hypocritical statement that a lot of sons and daughters are unfortunately dealing with. And of course, you can feel pretty conflicted after hearing those two things back to back, right? But, you know, this goes into, okay, well, how does that affect your adherence? How does that affect your self-confidence? How does that affect how you interact with those people at home? Because maybe because of your culture, there's a different dynamic that goes on in the home, whether you live there or you're visiting, that can change the way that you're able to really, you know, stick to what you want to do. And so having conversations when there is a cultural barrier too can be a lot harder, because maybe the way that your parents grew up is even more different than, you know, than what you are trying to live through and do for your health and fitness now. And the cultural expectations of what healthy is differs drastically among different cultures across the world.
Yeah, and I've actually seen this with some of my Hispanic clients, as they say the same thing when it comes to their meals, and they're like, it's very centered around rice, beans, tortillas. Like, I don't understand what am I supposed to eat to hit my macros? And if I say anything, it's disrespectful. And food is, and I would say that for a lot of cultures, that's what, I don't know, that's, everything centers around that. I mean, it's like with holidays, everything is centered around food. And, you know, rightfully so. Food is great. There's a lot of traditions that come with food. And as you mentioned, like a lot of people, that's how they show their love for people is through cooking, baking. I know I relate to that. But I was reading something, I think I saw it on Instagram where a very popular big team right now, he had someone DM him, and his girlfriend is Iranian, and someone from Iran had messaged him and said, I can't compete because I'd have all my licenses take away. Like the government, I guess, wouldn't approve of it. I was trying to find the post, but I guess it's gone now. And they're like, that's why I have to immigrate to America because my country literally sees it as disrespectful and I can't do that. So I think it's very interesting. And this wasn't anything that we had really planned on talking about today, but it was a really good point that you bring up, that your culture can sometimes make it feel like you can't be successful or be healthy with what you want to do. And that's a very, very difficult conversation to have when some people's, what am I trying to say? Can't find the word. Like they're
even feeling like you can't have that conversation
mm-hmm.
because it's just not a part of that culture or the acceptance of that culture.
Right. Yeah. So that's definitely a pretty big barrier. And another thing that might be an issue for friends, family, or spouse is the idea of you getting healthy or getting into competing is a change of a lifestyle for them too. And again, this is something that we will touch on later in the episode, but let's say that you used to party and drink all the time and maybe do drugs. Don't support that, but maybe that's just part of your environment and your friend group. And this is especially big for college students. If you prep or if you are getting serious about your health and fitness, then you probably will not drink or party as much anymore. And that can be really hard for people to accept because that's what you guys do. You party, you drink, you go out and have fun, and they might see you as not being fun anymore, and they might try to pressure you to drink, and it's really hard, and you might give in. And you actually might see some friendships change because I think it's true. You want friends who are going to support your goals and support your lifestyle, or, it's more fun to have a friend that would want to go to the gym with you than, go to happy hour. And that's not to say that you can't drink or have fun, but maybe try to find a balance. But, drinking and partying may no longer define your lifestyle. And especially in prep, you may not be able to go out to eat and travel and be spontaneous. And again, we'll touch on this later in the episode. But your friends and family might just see you as changing, and they're like, you're not the same anymore. And that's really hard to hear and to accept. So it's really difficult to either have friends that you no longer can be friends with, or try to sit down and talk with them, or be like, hey, I may not be able to do this all the time, but that doesn't mean that I don't still want to hang out with you guys, or maybe we can do a little bit of both, like here and there. But that's hard, especially if you've been friends with people for a really long time.
Yeah, and I think this also speaks to the fact that, the reason why this is happening, the reason why you're no longer fun anymore, with air quotes, or the reason why, people feel like you are changing or outgrowing them or whatever it might be, it's not, again, it's not this miserable thing that you're putting yourself through. Oftentimes these things happen naturally as you start to invest yourself in the lifestyle, and you say, wow, I feel really good when I do, my meal prep, and when I hit the gym this many times per week, and when I'm having great sessions, I feel really good. So what happens when drinking and partying comes into the picture, or, these spontaneous, eating out very often, or getting fast food, or whatever it might be? What happens when you do that? You're impeding on your ability to recover from your workouts. You're impeding on your ability to perform at your best, or to feel at your best, because everyone knows, I'm assuming a lot of you guys know at least, what it feels like to wake up the next morning after having drank way too much. And that doesn't feel good. And how do you feel about going to the gym that morning? Like that impedes on your ability to progress and to do what you now love. And so as we develop this love for fitness and for health and for wellness, it's not just that, oh, I'm not fun anymore, I should, just go hang out with my friends because they're right, I'm a stick in the mud and I suck. No, we have to stand for what we love. And ultimately, at our core, I think making the realization that you don't have to feel bad for that is really important. And a big first step for a lot of people to accept that maybe their friendships do have to change. Those are the things that can change and that we can manipulate based on what our priorities are. And that doesn't mean that you have to alienate those people, but if it does serve you to do so, and if it's really not serving you to be around those people, and it is just becoming a negative part of your life, that's okay. And I think realizing that you have outgrown a part of yourself, and maybe that comes along with those people, is a really important first step in making the decision to, maybe these types of people are the ones that I do need to move on from. And maybe there are other people in my life, maybe my family or my husband or wife, where this has to be something that we grow together with in some sort of way. But, with friendships, those are the ones you choose.
Yeah. And especially, I feel like you don't want friendships that are defined by partying and alcohol. You want friendships that are defined by the bonds that you guys have, and the just unconditional support that you have. And so trying to really figure out what has bonded you guys in friendship. Is it the partying and the drugs and going out all the time? Or is there anything below that surface level friendship? So the next thing to talk about is maybe your significant other. And I think this is more so in that specifically for significant others and maybe even family, but do they not support your wishes to compete because of financial reasons? So that is a real topic that can come up with your significant other, and financial disputes are one of the biggest issues that comes to people having arguments. It's extremely common. So and I would say that it's absolutely warranted. So I think having a conversation, sitting down, trying to budget, or, if you have a more concrete plan and say, hey, this is what I've researched. This is how much it might cost to compete. Here is what I've budgeted. Here's what I've laid out. Again, we'll talk about this later in the episode. But it's a good idea to have a better understanding of how much something is going to cost, or, when it comes to a gym membership, that you have a plan and you have some solid information so you can talk to your significant other or family about it, rather than just saying, well, I don't know how this is going to cost, but I want to do it anyway.
Yeah. I love that point that you brought up of just having that plan, having numbers to present. I think this is really pertinent in those situations where, let's say you're married and you do have joined finances. And that's not everyone, but this is kind of like where this really comes in, because, your money is not just your money anymore. And so personally, I'm not married, so that's not something I've had to approach quite yet. But a lot of people do, and a lot of people are beginning to, and this doesn't even have to be just competing, but living a healthier lifestyle, a lot of people view as expensive, because you have a gym membership, you have to buy healthier foods. Fresh foods can seem very expensive. And when you are thinking about maybe building a home gym because of the pandemic, there's a lot of expenses that could go into it, even outside of just competing, just pursuing a healthier lifestyle. So one of the things that I kind of thought of as you were saying that, presenting numbers, pull up your numbers, if you are, in your finances together with your partner, or, maybe they just have a very big role in your finances for whatever reason. And this could be with family as well. Pull up numbers of what your eating out bill looks like. Pull up numbers of those subscriptions that just kind of come out of your bank account that you don't even use anymore. Pull out the shopping, talk about and make sure you have, good justification of, if I'm going to be spending more on X, Y, and Z, meal prep, my coach that I'm paying for, and this gym equipment, then have other things that you're going to cut back on, so that you're not just digging into whoever's budget,
Mm-hmm.
you and someone else's, or your parents, or however you are managing your finances. Have things that you're going to cut back on too, so that maybe you even out the actual spending, and maybe you're just changing what you're spending on.
Mm-hmm.
I think that can be super powerful when you're having that conversation, because just coming at it with, I'm going to spend this money, and it's not your decision because it's my health,
Mm-hmm.
like that's not going to go well.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think having a plan will really make a big difference. So the next topic is maybe your friends, significant other, or family worry about your health. And I think this goes more into the competing aspect than just trying to get healthier, because, and I would say that their concerns are definitely warranted, because the end of a bikini prep or the end of a competition prep for fitness is not the healthiest. It really isn't. You're spending a lot of time on cardio, a lot of time working on the gym, a lot of time is dedicated to meal prep and to eating, and you get very, very, very lean. And we've talked about this before, again, in episode 4, but when you get truly stage lean, you look sick in person. Your face might be kind of sunken in. You look teeny tiny. You can probably see striations. And you don't look healthy, which is hilarious to me, because you're supposed to be this like poster for health and fitness, and you just look sick and you look tiny. And that couple weeks, maybe even a month before your show, people might ask, like, are you okay? Like, are you sick? Are you feeling okay? And that's really, really hard to see from a outsider's perspective, to watch someone that they love suffer, or that perceive suffering. And especially when you're talking about how hungry you are, how tired you are all the time, your family and your friends are just like, oh my gosh, please just eat. Like, it's really hard for them to see that. So I think that it's a genuine concern that they might have.
Yeah, and I think, how do you approach that, right? It's going to be difficult, because you're going to, most likely you're going to follow through on it regardless. And these people in your life may or may not care to really know the details. And even if you tell them the details, why this is temporary, why you have a coach that is going to get you out of it in a healthy way,
Mm-hmm.
and you have that, you should have that post-show plan.
Mm-hmm.
Reference episode 4, plug again. But yeah, you should have that plan, and you should have things set up. But again, it's not going to 100% register to those people in your life, because they're not the ones going through it, especially if we're talking about parents or people in other generations. It's just harder to bridge that gap. And so ultimately, what it comes down to is make sure that your family knows that, one, it is temporary, in whatever concept. I think a lot of times, when I've been in contest prep before, I've been like, oh, I only have to be this restrictive, it's temporary. And then, you show up a couple months later after your show, and they go, oh, you can eat now. You can eat everything here. Have this, have this, have this. That's kind of problematic too. But you can manage that situation when you get there. But, just making sure that your family, friends, significant others know that it is temporary, and that you are choosing to do this to yourself. But, there might be a point at which, if it is getting really negative, and people are, really starting to worry in the context of competition, because they just don't understand. And maybe, you've reached a level of acceptance of maybe they never will fully understand. And that goes for most people, I would say. But, if you reach that point, then maybe there is a point in your prep at which you need to kind of distance yourself just a little bit, to get yourself away from that negativity. And that's this, I want to make the disclaimer. This is not us telling you that as soon as you start your contest prep, you need to be a hermit and you need to not engage with your family for the entirety of your prep. That is not what we were saying. But, you know,
That might scare them more.
yeah, but towards the end, you know, you want to maybe avoid exposing yourself to that much negativity, or just shave down the hours that you're spending in those environments. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be a tricky situation to navigate, but I think just being selective about how you give your energy to other people towards the end of that process.
Yeah. Yeah, you said that really well. And the last kind of point that, or maybe an issue that I would say that this is more geared towards significant others, but maybe they just don't want you to get too muscular, again with air quotes, but maybe they just don't like the look of people with muscles, or especially on stage. Again, this is something that I dealt with at the beginning when I first got into competing, that I would show my husband stage pictures, and I thought these women were gorgeous and, you know, goals, and that's what I wanted to look like. And I showed my husband, and he was like, I don't find it attractive. I don't like the look. I think that they look too muscular. And I was like, well, I don't care. I'm doing it anyway. And that was just kind of the energy that I had, and that worked for me. And eventually, you know, and I would say towards the end of prep, my husband doesn't really, not care for, but he doesn't like my physique as much as he does when I have a little bit more fat on me. And, you know, that's the conversation that we have. And I know that it's not that he doesn't care about me anymore, or doesn't see me as attractive. He just has a different preference. And he also knows that it's very temporary. And that's, again, because we have gone through it, he knows that, you know, this is a deal. This is what's going to happen. It's not forever, and he'll get over it.
And I think a big part of this, you know, I don't want you to get too muscular, and like, let's talk about this in the context of you're starting your health and fitness journey. Eating is not on the table. You are just picking up a weight for the first time. You know, a lot of people are going to say this to you, and they're going to be genuinely concerned. And this is going to come, again, from a place of misinformation, because most people don't understand that you don't just blow up into the Hulk after lifting a weight 3 times. Because if we did, then everyone would be super jacked, and I would probably look like a She-Hulk.
Well, it makes me think of the meme where it's like, not lifting weights because you're afraid of looking like a bodybuilder is like not driving your car because you're fear of becoming a NASCAR driver.
Yeah, exactly. It's, you know, we put years and years and years into this. So if you think that just because you're picking up a weight for the first time, someone tells you, oh, you don't want to look like that, you know, really jacked bodybuilder chick that goes to your gym that everyone, you know, points their fingers at, that's not going to happen, especially not as a female. You're going to have to work for years and years and years. And maybe, you know, if you want to get to that level, that scary level, you might have to take, you know, illegal substances to get to that point. And so it's just not feasible. And this actually reminds me of a funny story that I saw on my coach's Instagram story, Brandon. I'm going to quote him directly because he put this up and I thought it was hilarious. He was getting fitted for a suit. And mind you, this is in the context of a male athlete. He was getting fitted for a suit for a wedding that he was going to be in. And the woman was taking his measurements. She was just kind of looking him up and down. And she goes, are you going to work out from now until the wedding? And the wedding was like 3 or 4 weeks away. And at first he was like, I didn't process what she was asking me, because I was like, what do you mean? Yeah, of course I'm going to train. And then he realized she was asking because she was concerned about him getting too big for the suit that she was measuring at the time. And he was like, yes, I'm going to work out. No, my measurements are not going to change. What my
in 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, what my measurements are now, it's going to be the same when I show up to the wedding, but thank you for your concern. So a lot of that does come from misinformation.
Yeah.
The process of actually building muscle is so painfully slow.
It's so hard.
I've been watching paint dry. I can promise you that. So yeah, a lot of it will come from that, and trying to lecture someone on it, probably not the best solution, but we'll get into solutions now as we transition.
Yeah, so that's a really good segue into the next kind of portion of this episode is, okay, so it's evident that your friends, family, spouse, they have issues with you competing, or they have issues with you trying to get healthy. So what do we do? So kind of getting into the more practical applications. So I think it's really important to sit down and think, why is this important for you? So why is it important that you make a change in your health and fitness, or you want to feel healthier, you want to look healthier, you're trying to make positive changes? So find your why. And, what would you lose if you stop this lifestyle? And what do you gain? So maybe you just have to sit down and actually make a pro and cons list, or, you have to just write down everything that comes to mind and almost kind of create not your argument, but just create the bullet points that you want to touch on if you're having this difficult conversation. And I think that sitting down and writing everything out helps you organize your ideas and maybe articulate yourself a lot better than you would have just going into an argument and a little bit more heated and letting your emotions take over. So just being a little bit more logical, having some certain points that you definitely want to touch on. But I think at the end of the day, why this is important to you, I think, is one of the biggest things to touch on.
And I think at a certain point, the why becomes who you are.
Who you am.
Who I am. Who I ain't, who I am. No, but for real, at this point in our careers, and I actually had a conversation with Nick, with the Motley, who we interviewed episode 7. But when we had our consultation call, because I hired him as a physical therapist before we started the podcast and had him on. But I hired him, and in our first conversation on Zoom, he was asking me, who are you? Why is this important to you? Why is injury important to you, etc. And we were having an email conversation at some point, and I was like, oh, it doesn't, really matter if I get back to squatting, or we were having some conversation. I was like, oh, it doesn't really matter if X, Y, and Z. And he was like, are you sure about that? Because it does matter. This is who you are. Like, lifting is your livelihood. Lifting and helping others be healthier people is you, and you're an inspiration and icon to women, blah blah blah. And I was like, wow, you just hyped me the fuck up. But but seriously, at this point in our careers, this is who we are. This lifestyle is who we are. And you may or may not get there depending on how truly invested you are. Your health and your fitness takes a different weight in every single individual. But a lot of you guys listening, this is starting to become who you are because you're listening to content like this. You saturate your day with podcasts like ours. You love listening. And maybe you're just on the way there and you're taking steps towards that. But eventually it does kind of become who you are. And so your why is, this is integral to my identity now at this point, is living a healthier lifestyle. And so when someone threatens that and doesn't support you and is trying to take that away from you or whatnot, they're challenging your identity at a certain point. So that's not everyone, but that's kind of one point that I wanted to make for our really, go hard enthusiasts that we do have listening here today, or other competitors, or what it might be.
Yeah. So I have a very, very close relationship with my mom, and I share everything with her. And I remember, again, back in 2014, when I first started my Instagram account, it was completely anonymous. I was petrified to share who I was. And I had this, I don't know. I didn't think that people were going to take me seriously. And I hid it from my husband. And I was telling her, I'm like, okay, well, it'll be real once I hit 1,000 followers, or I think 100 followers. And I was like, I'll finally tell him. And that day hit, and I hit 100 followers, and I showed my husband, and he was like, okay, this is kind of weird. This was before fit accounts were more popular and more mainstream. But so I was very open with my mom in the very beginning, and especially when it came to competing and being healthier. And she said that, she watched me kind of go through this phase of going to the gym and it becoming a part of my life and tracking my macros. She said, but it didn't really click with her until one day we were out at dinner, and I forget kind of how this came about, but the manager of the restaurant came over and he was talking to us, and I think he had mentioned something. He's like, "Oh, you look fit," or something along those lines. And he's like, "Oh, I want to lose weight or something." So, he was showing some interest, and I wasn't, I was like, "Yeah, I'm a coach." And I think he started asking me some questions, and he ended up sitting down with us, and I was talking to him about like reverse dieting and macros and how to count macros and all of this stuff. And I guess I just was like talking, and he was like, "Thank you so much. Like, that was so helpful. Like, I'm definitely going to reach out to you. I have so many, questions. I'm just very overwhelmed, and like, I'd love to talk to you later." And he left, and my mom was like, "You could have talked for another 2 hours, like 3 hours." And I was like, "Yeah, probably." And she was like, I see how passionate you are about health and fitness and nutrition, and how passionate you are about helping other people. And she was like, I can just see you light up when you talk about this. And she was like, that's when it clicked for me, that this was what you were doing, what you were supposed to do. And you were in this position, and it wasn't just a fad. It wasn't just like, this is who you are. And, and that was maybe a couple years later. But she finally realized that, yeah, this is part of my identity, and this is who I am, and it's not going to change. And, we're in it for the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, that foundational why is, I think the other thing I wanted to mention was it's going to be important in those situations where maybe you're not there yet. Maybe it's not, all you yet, maybe this lifestyle is something that you're still working on, even making a habit. And I think that does comprise, that's a lot of our audiences, they're working on making this sustainable. That's why they're attracted to this message, right? And that why is going to be so important in those situations where maybe you are being tempted by your friends that like to drink and party, and you're torn whether or not you want to throw it all away for that night and just say, screw it, I'm just gonna do what I want and join in with my friends, or like, am I gonna make a bigger decision that serves my bigger goal, my greater goal? And those situations, remembering your why, maybe you're not in a confrontational setting with those people who are not supporting you or pressuring you, but that's going to feed into the decision that you make. So, having that really solid why of, this makes me feel like my best self, this improves my self-confidence, my mental health, my physical health. Have those things in your back pocket, because even now, fitness is our identity, but we still have those moments where we're playing tug of war with, do we want to throw in the towel for the night, or do we want to stick to what we want to do? And yeah, we've had way more practice, making that correct decision. And that's the reason why, we're quote unquote experts now. But that didn't come without practicing, making that decision, revisiting our why, and making a conscious decision instead of just going with the flow.
Yeah. And also, when we talk about why this is important to you, and we're gearing more towards competing and that competitive aspect of getting up on stage, if you are thinking about competing, you've never done it before, your why might be a little bit different, and you may not be able to fully explain it. And because I know I didn't. And, when my husband was like, "Well, why do you want to do this?" I was like, "Well, I don't know if I'm going to like it. I don't know if I'm going to compete again. I don't know if I'm going to get on stage and be like, wow, that sucked. I hated it. I'm never doing that again." But my thing was, hey, at least afterwards, I now have, I have experience, and I can say, yeah, I want to do that again, or no, I don't, but at least I know, and I won't have those regrets. So that was probably one of the biggest things that one of my biggest arguments to him is, that's why it's important. I need to know, and I need to do this for me. I need to see if I can do it.
And you need to do it 100%.
Yeah.
You need to go through that first time process knowing you gave it everything, so that if you don't like the end result, it's not because of anything you did, right? Or didn't do, for example. So
right. Yeah. So that was one of the biggest things for me is I need to know. I need to have answers. I need to do, it's something that I'm interested in right now, and I don't ever want to have regrets. So once you've kind of figured out your why, now it's time to communicate to them. So having those tough conversations, and it may not be a one-time thing. It may be multiple conversations drawn out over multiple weeks, maybe even multiple months, or maybe even years. And trying to discuss why this is important to you, try to educate them a little bit better. Like Marissa said, not lecturing them every single time you meet, because then eventually they might start to resent your lifestyle and resent the information that you're presenting. I have a coworker who, when I first told her that I tracked macros, because she was asking questions, I brought my food in a lot. She was like, we have this long-standing joke in our family about macros because my sister-in-law tracks them, and we don't stop hearing about it. And she's like, and anytime she brings it up, we roll our eyes. Like she's like, we're just not receptive to it because of the way that she talks to us. And she was like, not gonna lie, when you first started talking about it, she was like, I was not interested because of all the negative, emotions I had when it came to tracking macros. She's like, but the way you explained it, you weren't like condescending. You weren't talking down to me. You just were explaining like very scientifically and like, not saying I do this because it's better or whatever. But I just thought it was interesting how it's like you have this whole family of people who are not receptive to hearing about macros because of the negative experience they had with one family member. So trying to communicate in a way that's not condescending, that's not going to bring about negative emotions, trying to leave emotion out of it as much as possible and try to talk about facts. I think that that's really important when you're trying to have a nice conversation with someone.
Yeah, and I think you probably stuck out to her too because you probably didn't bring it up until she asked, right?
Oh, no, definitely not.
Yeah, and so she probably noticed and she was like, huh, she's doing the same thing as my sister-in-law, except she has not said a word about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious as to why this is like a different experience than the one I already had, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of speaks to what I was saying about, let's not just shout from the rooftops and try to, yell this at everyone because you think it's the best way to go about living a healthier lifestyle. That's great that you're passionate about it or that you think it's the right thing to do. But again, coming to people with, a forced opinion is never going to be received as well as if you are asked from genuine curiosity. And I say genuine curiosity because a lot of times people will ask questions about your diet without really wanting to know the real answer.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to disseminate between those two types of inquiries is going to be difficult at first because you're probably excited about what you're doing. You're probably eager to tell other people what you're doing and why. But, remember that sometimes people, especially people who maybe have a history with yo-yo dieting or something like that in your family or the friend group, they might just be asking to confirm their own biases or to hear what they think they want to hear. And so oftentimes when I'm approached with a question about my diet, it might be something like, oh, like I heard that, you have to have a protein shake as soon as you finish your workout, or I
Mm-hmm.
heard that, you can't have carbs after this time. Is that true? A lot of people will come to you with those questions of like verifying that what they've heard or what, and typically how I kind of like to approach this is I will answer yes or no, and I will leave it there unless they ask for more. So they'll say, I heard that you have to have that protein shake immediately after working out, or like you lose all your gains. I actually had my mom say that to me the other day when we were together at the gym, and I said, nope, that's not true. And she was like, oh, okay. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. So you don't have to turn every answer into a lecture. And a lot of times that will turn people off. So sometimes people just want that yes or no, or they want to confirm their biases. And if they really do want to know more, they'll ask you the questions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, when you can have the really productive conversations like that waiter or manager of that restaurant that you were talking about. Like, that's incredible. But clearly this guy was receptive and open to
Mm-hmm.
more information. And that's not going to be everyone that you come across.
Right. And so I think when you are having those conversations with friends, family, significant other, just to remember good ways of communicating with them is, so again, not trying to talk down, being open and hearing what they have to say as well, because while this is a change that you want to make, it's very important to hear their concerns and what they're feeling. You may not feel like they're valid, but these are feelings that they're feeling. And so trying to work through the concerns that they have. So that brings us to the next point, is maybe you need to compromise. So maybe your spouse is feeling like you're not spending as much time with them anymore. So maybe your compromise is having to get up a little bit early to do your cardio. So in the afternoon, you can get in your lift and you're not spending 4 hours at the gym. And by the time you come home, you're wiped, you don't have any energy, and you just go to sleep. And your spouse is like, well, I didn't get to hang out with you at all. So maybe it's just some sort of compromise that you have to make. And so hopefully your spouse, family, friends are open to compromising, and they're open to trying to come up with some sort of solution that works for both sides.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's important to make those sacrifices. I think that's what a lot of people are talking about when we say, oh, this lifestyle requires sacrifices. I have clients who are mothers, fathers, and
Mm-hmm.
getting in their workouts, compared to when they were single, is really, really different, especially when
Mm-hmm.
you have kids or pets, and you have to make those sacrifices. That's what we talk about with this lifestyle. It's not just like, oh, my sacrifice is that I don't eat pizza anymore. Like that's not the sacrifice. The sacrifice is, making this lifestyle truly sustainable
Mm-hmm.
by making the time around the other things that are important in your life. And I think one important, kind of perspective for you here is, even though we might want our lives to just be working out and eating healthy and meal prepping and have that be it, we have so much else going on in our lives. We have
Mm-hmm.
relationships to tend to and to nurture. And so it's really important to make sure that you are fitting your fitness into your life and not trying to fit your life around your fitness. So like Christina said, if that means that you need to start to become an early morning workout person so that you can free up that time that is super valuable to your significant other, then you might need to do that. And if it's not a sacrifice that you're willing to make, then that might be a question of whether you truly value that partner in your life enough
Mm-hmm.
to make that sacrifice for them. Because
Mm-hmm.
typically, if you value that person, you're going to want to make that compromise with them. So, not trying to give you relationship advice, but seriously, like those compromises are so important, and they do speak to bigger dynamics.
Mm-hmm. And something, again, it's figuring out what this person, what they value. And so maybe it's that the time that they value together. So my husband is very much, he likes traveling and new experiences and socializing, and so it's hard to go out to restaurants, especially if I'm in prep. Off season, not a huge deal at all, but in prep, there are times where we go out to breweries or to restaurants, and I have water. But or I'll bring my own food or whatever. But I am compromising. I'm not just saying, no, I'm not going because I can't eat anything or I can't drink or I'm going to be miserable. I'm like, no, of course I'm going to go and still hang out. And I have to do things a little bit different, but I'm still able to hang out. And same thing, like if we travel, I might have to do a little bit of extra preparation to make sure that I have all my food and I feel more prepared, and that I'm able to attend this trip. But I have to tell him, hey, towards the end, I'm going to have to sit some stuff out. I don't have the energy, or I can't go on a 7-day trip, but I can maybe go on a 2-day trip, or, you can go alone, but I can't towards the end. And so that's a compromise that we both understand, that, hey, I'm not going to be able to do everything, but I'll try my hardest. And I'll try to do everything I can in my power, but he has to understand at the same time where there are times where I do need to be a little bit more selfish. And that kind of comes to compromising when it comes to picking out a season and being like, hey, like, I know you want to do all this stuff, or, I just can't, I have to be a little bit more selfish, but hey, once show season is over, then we'll start doing some more stuff for you. And we'll start giving more attention to things that you want to do and not so much on me. So understanding, I feel like relationships, whether it's with a spouse or a significant other, family member, that it's not always going to be 100% like 50-50 at all times. That it might be 60-40, or maybe towards the end of the prep, it's like 90-10. But you're communicating with that person, and you're letting them know, hey, I do have to be selfish. I'm really sorry, but it's not always going to be like this. So I think being able to communicate and compromise are just huge, huge, huge factors.
Yeah, and it's a lot of give and take.
Yes. Yeah.
It goes in phases. So that prep phase might end up 90-10 by the end for you. But you have to acknowledge after that prep is over that is going to shift, and it needs to shift.
Yeah, it needs to.
It's kind of the dynamic of a healthy relationship is acknowledging that it is going to come in phases and waves, depending on your priorities and your partner's priorities.
Yeah.
And, that might be, this is speaking to competing specifically. You might be planning out the years that you want to have your season well in advance. I know that's a conversation that we're already having because, again, I don't plan to compete until 2023. And, that's kind of the conversation at hand right now. And that's kind of what we are planning around and thinking about in terms of life plans. And so, yeah, that's super big. And I think it's important to really, again, remember that you're putting this on yourself. And when you are having these conversations, if you're portraying your lifestyle as a negative thing, then that person in your life is going to be less inclined to help support you because you're painting it as a negative picture. But if you are, portraying it as something that maybe it does take energy and sacrifice and time, and maybe you're not always, perfect about handling it, but if someone can tell that it's something that betters you, makes you a more joyous person, and a better person overall, usually that reaching that point of where they are willing to compromise with you or support you will come easier because you're not constantly bitching and moaning about what it is you have to do. And that goes for competing, and that goes for just in general, making trade-offs and sacrifices for living a healthier lifestyle.
So when it comes to competing, a solution that we have is to maybe attend a show with a family member, a significant other. And that way they can see firsthand what it's going to look like. Or maybe it's not attending a show, but maybe it's going to the gym and getting in a workout together, and showing them what it is that you really like to do and what you're interested in. And having that experience together can make a big, big difference because they can see firsthand. You guys have something to talk about, and they can build their own ideas surrounding maybe fitness, bodybuilding, rather than whatever preconceived notion that they have or whatever it is. So I think that that's really big to do together, and it can close a lot of gaps.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, if you don't already, if it's a partner or a friend, or a family member, kind of showing them the ropes, but not in a condescending way. I was lucky enough to, when I met Aaron, we met sort of at the gym, and he was already kind of doing his own thing, and I was doing my own thing, and not everyone's going to be, put in that situation or have that kind of luck. But, if they don't go to the gym at all, and they do express the interest in coming with you, then, take them through one of your workouts. Probably shave off a set or two of every exercise so that they don't feel crippled and to the point that they can't walk the next day. But, show them the ropes, help them with their form in a constructive way. And a lot of times you can bond together over the pain of burning muscles. But you can also, bond over, the fact that maybe this is a routine that you start together too. So that goes back to being inclusive, and we can talk about that with your diet too, showing someone, okay, well, I'm making this swap and using 2% cheese or skim milk instead of whole milk, or this low fat version of this because it helps me reduce my fat intake or something like that. As simple as that. Would you like that on your meal as well?
Mm-hmm.
And if they say no, give them the regular thing,
Mm-hmm.
and opening those doors in a way that's non-judgmental and not pushy.
Mm-hmm. So that kind of goes into like the idea of like bringing them in for a workout or going to a show together, or maybe ask them if they want to compete with you. So I think that, that could be a really fun experience to have with your significant other, or maybe like your best friend, where it's like, hey, instead of, going out to the bars every weekend, like let's get our workouts in, let's do posing together. And that's another experience that you guys can have and go through and talk about. And it does change the dynamic of the friendship relationship, but now you guys have a goal that you're working towards together. And maybe your significant other friend they have no interest in that, and that's fine too. You don't need to force it on them. But maybe just throwing that out there to say like, this isn't solely just for me, that this is something that we can do together.
Yeah, definitely. Probably not going to be a real thing, but who knows? Aaron jokes about competing with me in 2023. So if you want to go blow him up and tell him that he should do it,
do it.
Really appreciate it. No, but in all reality, I would not have a preference whether he did or not. But it's funny that he's like, oh yeah, maybe I'll just prep with you when you prep in 2023, or maybe I'll just diet really hard that year to help support and just like kind of be in it with you. And I think that is something that's definitely an opinion and his viewpoint that has developed over the years now. So that kind of support is not going to come immediately, but I think it comes with time and handling those situations and those conversations in a positive way. I think that's kind of a result that you can get out of doing that productively.
And I think it's important to realize that just because your significant other or a friend doesn't want to do it with you doesn't mean that they don't support your goals, or I don't know. I don't know what I'm really trying to say, but they don't need to do that with you for you to be able to do it on your own. That you can still do it, and it might make it easier if you have someone who is tracking, who's doing the cardio with you, who's getting in their workouts and posing. It doesn't mean that you can't do it on your own. And it might be a little bit harder, but it's just something that you have to overcome. And so we kind of talk about this when it comes to like handling food. And maybe we'll jump into this right now, but when it comes to dinner, and this is something that I've done for years. So again, married, so I'll make food for my husband and for myself. And so for a really long time, I was making 2 dinners. And I would make whatever he would want, and then I'd have my food. And it was hard because I had to track my food, and for a while he wasn't tracking. And so that did make it kind of difficult, especially if I was making 2 separate meals. Now it's a little bit easier because he does track. And so we can say, hey, like we're making pasta. So like I'll measure out my pasta, he'll measure out, his pasta, and we'll figure it out together. And it's a little bit easier. But during prep, there are times where he'll come home with like pizza and beer, and I can't have that. But while it would be easier if we were in a dieting phase together, I can't be mad at him for having that food or for bringing it home. That again, realizing that this is my decision. I'm doing this for me. No one is forcing me to diet. No one is forcing me to eat healthy. That this is something that I do because it makes me feel good, or because it's going to help me reach my goal. So food can be a very, very touchy subject. But just because someone isn't doing something with you doesn't mean that they don't support you. I think that's just a really important concept to remember and think about.
Yeah, you definitely hit the point that I was thinking. It goes back to your why. Are you doing it for you? If so, you should not need someone else to be doing it with you for you to follow through.
Right.
And yeah, tons of situations where we've gone home from the gym together and he's gone through the drive-through, gotten whatever the heck he wants. And do you want anything? No. Or like Chick-fil-A, diet lemonade. That'd be great.
Yeah.
But like, we get back, I put together some leftovers of my meal prep, and he eats whatever it is he's gotten through the drive-through, and it's not a problem. You know, you can't be mad if if they have not, you know, committed to this journey for themselves. And even so, that's their own decision, and you don't control someone's decisions. So yeah, it's important to remember that, yeah, it might be easier, it might make it easier, it might make it more fun, but it's no one else's responsibility to hold you accountable except your own.
Yeah. And so that brings us to the next kind of topic, is how you handle your health and fitness journey and food. And, you know, are you obsessed over it, or are you a little bit more relaxed? So how you handle your food and situations can ultimately, you know, your friends and family, that's how they perceive health and fitness. And like for me, you know, I went to go visit my mom in Florida, and she knew that I was going to spend an hour and a half, 2 hours a day, doing cardio and lifting. But there were some times where she was like, hey, instead of doing your normal fasted cardio, like, can we go on a bike ride together? And if I have this like obsessive mindset around it, I could have been like, no, I need to do it on the treadmill. I need to do it at a 10% incline at 3%, or 3 miles per hour. Like, you know, I can't bike ride because I can't track it. Like, no, I was like, yeah, of course. Like, we're able to spend time together and we're still able to be active. Is it not part of my normal routine? Yeah, it's not, but I chose to just be relaxed, or, instead of, you know, going to the gym and doing that, like we can go on walks. Like when Marissa was here, that's something that we chose to do together, instead of me being like, nope, I gotta go to the gym. Like, I'm not gonna spend time with you. And same thing when it comes to food. Like, if your family orders pizza and you choose to have chicken and vegetables, or maybe like half a slice or a slice of pizza, you are able to be relaxed and not obsessive about it. And I think that makes a huge difference in how your family, your significant others, or friends view this interest that you have.
Yeah. And like, especially for the majority of you listening who are not competing, you know, you have the ability and the option to practice that moderation. When your family's ordering food in, or you're going through the drive-through, you can say yes and partake in situations where, you know, maybe your macro allocations warrant it, or, you know, maybe you're in a situation or a place where you're flexible enough. And so exercise that flexibility, you know, don't just rely on the only things in your fridge and that's it. Because that's
right.
That's not only going to damage relationships, but it's going to put you in a negative headspace with your own relationship with food.
Yeah. So I think just trying to find that balance between not being crazy obsessed with getting in your workouts, or, you know, making sure that you're eating everything to the gram, but then also not being too relaxed. So just trying to find that nice balance. And I think also too, when I was with my mom, realizing like, you know, there are times where we both wanted to stay in and cook. And then there were times where we went out to dinner, and it was okay if I couldn't track everything to a gram, but spending more time in the moment and being present with my mom was more important to me than obsessing over, you know, well, what is this sauce? Like, you know, does it have oil in it? Or, you know, I don't know, just being more present with the people that you're around, and trying to obsess at every single moment all the time.
Yeah. Let's do an entire episode on balance and finding that middle ground on the seesaw for sure.
Definitely.
Coming soon.
That is definitely the theme of this podcast.
Yeah.
Let's do an episode on that.
Yeah.
And then the next point we had was, you know, if you are, well, yeah. So I guess kind of when it comes to prepping health and fitness, knowing that there's an extreme, and we don't want to go to those extremes. And so spending too much time in the gym, versus spending time with your significant other. So we've touched on this before, but you know, you very much can spend 4 or 5 hours in the gym a day. It's very easy to do that, especially if you're prepping for a show. You could be doing upwards of 2 hours of cardio a day, and that doesn't include your workout, and that doesn't include the amount of time that you need to pose. And so it can, again, we have those ebbs and flows of competing and in season versus off season. But that can also translate over to just normal everyday health and fitness. People who are just doing this as a lifestyle, is that you can spend too much time in the gym and not with your significant other. So again, trying to compromise and find ways that work with both of your schedules. And you say, well, maybe if we're gonna be home on the weekends together, maybe I'll go to the gyms then, and then afterwards, we have the rest of the day to hang out together. So I don't know, whatever it is that works for your relationship and works for your guys' schedule. But know that there is a too much time in the gym. That is possible.
Definitely.
And then we talked about that, competing can be a self-centered sport, and that there are times where it's going to be very intense, but how you handle yourself around your friends and family can make a really, really big difference in how they perceive things. So again, if you're crazy obsessive over everything and you are yelling at your friends and family for ordering pizza, and they know that you can't eat that and that's not fair to you, and everyone else needs to eat chicken and tilapia and broccoli, like that's not fair to them, because they're not choosing to do this. Like, they didn't make a decision. It may, I don't know, maybe it'd be easier, but that doesn't mean that you have to be like mean to other people, that this is your choice and this is your decision and not anyone else's.
And if you decide to be miserable, don't bring your misery onto other people
Mm-hmm.
just because that's the way you're feeling. And also, if you are feeling miserable, acknowledge the fact that you can change that just by switching your mindset.
Right. Yeah. And so I think and I've talked about this before in previous episodes, but I don't really like people to know whether I'm in prep or not. Obviously, at the very end, they can tell, or if I'm a little chunky, like relatively speaking, they can tell, but I always bring my gallon with me. I always have people ask me, can you eat this? Like, are you tracking? Like, they know to ask that question, but they sometimes don't know the answer because they don't know what season I'm in. So I think that that's really important, that it's not, it's a part of my lifestyle. So they know that that's a thing, and it's just, hey, can you do this? Can you not? And if I say yes, then they're like, awesome. Like, here's some food. Or if I'm like, no, I can't eat that, they're like, okay, cool. And they know to not pressure me. And I think it's, I'm very fortunate to have those types of friendships and people who understand and recognize that that's something that I like to do. But I'm also not crazy about it. And I'm like, I can't eat this. And, da, 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 da. So I think it's, I don't know. I think that there's a good and bad way to do things when it comes to health and fitness or competing.
Yeah. And also acknowledge the fact that those heuristics and the things that the people ask you, can you eat this? Can you not? Their reaction to that, and the fact that they asked that at all, that came with time, that came with years, that came with exposure, that came with conversations, that came with everything that we're talking about in this episode.
Yeah. So the next thing to do is, maybe you've had those tough conversations. Maybe you've tried to educate your friends and family and they're not receptive. Do it anyway. Just do it. Maybe you don't have the support that you would really like and, would make it easier. Maybe it might be harder for you. Maybe they don't support you, but do it anyway, because you might grow to resent them. And if you don't try, if you don't go through your health and fitness journey, you might regret it down the road. And that's not a fun feeling to have. And just know that you won't be able to form an opinion on your health and fitness journey or a diet or fitness in general if you don't do it yourself. And you might not like it, you might not see results, you might hate it, or you might find that you have a newfound passion and hobby that you didn't even know existed. And that's what happened for me and Marissa. We didn't know until we actually tried and made some mistakes, but we did it and we took action. And then we found where we are. And here we are, we have a podcast on health and fitness and trying to spread that knowledge and encourage other people to do it themselves.
Yeah, and I think this is really important with like maybe those cultural or generation barriers. You know, if it's your parents, and maybe we're talking about the Asian cultures, that maybe they're just, you know, very, very sticklers to, you know, okay, you're a female, you need to be 120 pounds, you need to be very skinny, and you have to eat everything I put on your plate, but then once you finish, I'm telling you that you're fat. You know, if you're in that situation, and maybe those are your parents, and maybe you see them once a week, or maybe you live with them even, but ultimately, you know, if there is so much of a gap that they are just never gonna really get it, and you know that without, you know, and you've tried, you've had calm conversations, and it still hasn't really gone well, and maybe there's just a stubbornness in a family member or a friend, or, you know, there's that cultural or generation gap that makes it too difficult for that person to understand. Ultimately, you are going to end up being the only person stopping yourself from doing something. Um, these people in your life, while they do have great influence over you, they do not control you. And
Mm-hmm.
so, if this really is something that is so important to you that you have to do it, and you know you need to do it for whatever reason, um, you know, and it's just a constant disapproval from those people that you love, then, you know, you may need to remove yourself from that environment. Maybe that means moving out and, you know, starting, you know, to live on your own. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that means visiting just a little bit less often, or when you do visit during times that it's not centered around food, right? So like maybe you visit your parents every Sunday for dinner, and that's becoming a very toxic situation for you because of what your goals are at that given moment, and that's very important to you. Maybe you visit a different time of the week every week,
Mm-hmm.
and so that way you're not sacrificing time with your family, because that's not what we're trying to tell you. But maybe you replace that time with the same amount of quality time spent, but it's around a different meal that maybe, you know, your parents don't value quite so much, or maybe it's not around food and maybe you're doing something else together. And so you can remove yourself from that situation in a more positive way, but you do have to kind of think about it and be creative with it in
Mm-hmm.
some cases.
Yeah, or maybe, again, talking about that compromise, maybe you need to bring a Tupperware of chicken over. And so you're coming over for dinner, but you know that you have your, 4 or 5 ounces of chicken, and you're going to have, some of the sides that they're having, or you try to make a healthier version of something that they're eating. That way you're still participating, but you're still trying to reach your goals and letting them know, hey, this is important to me, but I'm still enjoying this time with you guys. Or maybe you offer to help cook, or you cook the meal. You have them come over to your house, or if you're living with them, that you cook with your mom or your dad, and you try a different recipe, or something. That way, again, you're not trying to force anything on them, but you're still trying to participate as best you can, and try to compromise so everyone is happy.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So again, you won't be able to form an opinion, or you won't be able to do it unless you do it. So just go for it. Or maybe they're not open to compromise. Maybe they don't want to have you over, or they don't support you competing, and they want to distance themselves from you. So use that negativity to fuel you even more. Or if they say you're never going to amount to that, or you're never going to step on stage, that'll never happen. Use that negativity to fuel you even further and to push you. And of course, you should always have that intrinsic motivation, but prove them wrong. Whenever you're like, man, I really want to cheat on my diet, or really don't want to do my cardio right now, be like, well, you know what? They don't think I can do it, and I want to show them that I can. And so hopefully that's not the mindset you have all throughout your health and fitness journey, that you have some other goals that you're reaching for and things that you're doing for you, but you can use that to push you further and to help you not give up on your journey.
Yeah, I think that that could be a big thing with, you know, relationships that are plagued by abuse and jealousy and
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing. You know, if this is, you know, a lot of people do get into their health and fitness journey to get their revenge body or whatever it may
Mm-hmm.
be. And, you know, I see that as a positive and a negative thing because it can be problematic if that's your only source of motivation to spite someone. But if you do have intrinsic motivations as well, you know, you can use that. You know, I'm going to prove this person wrong. You know, they didn't think that I could do it, or they thought that, you know, I wouldn't be a good person if I pursued this. But you know, you can show everyone and that person that, you know, you can really achieve great things when you set your mind to it and when you commit.
Yeah, I love that. So the other thing, again, just going for it and just doing it, knowing that maybe your significant other, your family members might change their mind, and it may not be something that happens within one day or a month, but maybe a couple years down the road. Because like I mentioned, that's something that happened with my husband. He didn't really like the idea of me competing, but he said, you know, I'm going to support you. I don't like it, but I'm going to support you. And now, you know, years later, he goes, I understand why you do it. And I have seen the changes that you've made. And I don't want to do it personally, but I understand why you do it. And I'm going to help you do it and help you get there. So maybe your spouse changes their mind and maybe they don't, but knowing that that is something that could potentially happen if you go for it.
Yeah. And again, you know, it's something that maybe it just takes time and exposure. So, you know, just the act of tracking macros for me and my boyfriend was something that he had to warm up to for quite a while. And I was lucky enough that he was never disrespectful or never questioned my choices. But it took him a very long time to be like, you know, I want to try this for myself. This is interesting
Hmm.
now. And so even though you might be at first faced with adversity when you're first making this decision, um, and this happens, you know, this happens at the beginning for a lot of people at the beginning of your journey, because you know you make these changes and they're sudden and they're changes to people, you know. And so sometimes it just does take you persevering on, to kind of make it a known thing or an accepted thing, that people will accept or even come to be interested in the future. But just like anything with your health and fitness journey, patience is so important and it cannot
Hmm.
be overstated. You know, nothing's going to happen overnight, and that includes the mindsets of the people that you love
Hmm.
changing.
And, you know, maybe it's not tracking macros, but maybe it's, you know, a couple months later or a year later, your significant other, maybe even a family member says, hey, like, can I come to the gym with you? Can I see what you do? Like, can you show me what to do in the gym? But if you're constantly trying to push it on them, they might not be as receptive. So I think it's so much more powerful when they come to you. And so that's really exciting. And I know that happened with some of my friends where we would start, instead of, you know, happy hours or, you know, we'd live together, and that was a lot of fun. And it was something that we really bonded over. But, you know, it's something that they have to warm up to first. So I think the big kind of takeaway and what we really want to, I guess, preach to you guys is, at the end of the day, you deserve respect and you deserve love and you deserve people who support your passions. And it is a really tough conversation to have with people, especially those people who are close to you, to maybe have to distance yourself or completely cut people out of your life, because you are doing this for you and you are doing this to better yourself and to become the best version of yourself and who you are meant to be. And if you have dreams or you have goals, do not abandon them for anyone. That you do not want to resent someone at the, you know, when you're 80 years old and you're lying on your deathbed and wish that you had taken something more seriously or wish that you had done something. And I mean, I cannot stress enough that at least competing was one of the biggest, probably, if not the biggest factor that has changed who I am as a person and the confidence that I have. And it's led to a deeper insight into who I am as a person. I've discovered more things about myself just from one prep than I ever have in years of my life. So I would hate someone to not take a leap of faith because they're afraid of maybe what others might think, or afraid of a friend group who may not support them anymore. So I just say go for it.
Yeah, I don't think I have much else to add on that. That's a really great and inspiring way to finish. And I think everyone can take something away from this, whether it's just learning to live a healthier lifestyle and allowing that to become your identity over time. Now you're the healthy friend or whatever. that becomes a thing for a lot of people, but it ultimately it's going to change you for the better to take a step in this direction with this journey and this lifestyle. So really you have nothing to lose. And again, no one else is worth you regretting or resenting them for not having taken this step. And if it really is just, hey, I want to live a healthier lifestyle, and that's the end goal. Someone who really meets that with a lot of resistance, you need to start questioning a lot more than just, are they supporting me or not?
Yeah. So kind of the idea of nothing to lose, but everything to gain.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good way to wrap up today's episode. So we hope that you guys really enjoyed it and hopefully inspired you guys to get out there and chase your goals and dreams. And if you guys have any further questions, or if you have a particular topic or something that you want to talk about further with us, feel free to reach out to us. That's what we're here for. We're here to be resources for you guys and to help you through. And we may not have all the answers, but we can try to give you some talking points or some ideas. But so we hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, and you can find both of us on Instagram if you do want to shoot us a DM. So you can find me at Chrissy Lynn Fit, and Marissa is at Marissa Roy Fitness. So thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode, and we hope to see you back next week.